Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Motivational Monday. Hey, listen, today's going to be more of a real life example. So we went over our our last 7 days of what it looks like just creating a new you, reinventing yourself, and the whole premise is that God did it first. And so, if we can just take what the ultimate designer has done, y'all know I love design. So, if we can just take what the ultimate designer has done and parallel that to what we can do also for ourselves, there might be some correlations, maybe. And I think that some of it can really stand the test of time, or at least just your experience of trying to go through this process of just beginning again. So, take a look. So the first thing that we dealt with, and I'm going to go through the actual steps or the days, and then we're going to then apply it to me, because some of us, we just really need a practical understanding of what does this look like in real life. You hear a lot of these people talk about start again, be a new you, and it's like, well, what does that mean? And then you have to pay money to go to a conference, or to do something to figure out what it is, and then you're like, oh, I could have done that on my own. Well, this is your chance. You can get this. You can get some of this stuff right now. So, at least from my perspective. The first one is that God created the heavens and the earth, right? That's where we start off. It is the fact that even though you want to begin again or create something new within you or yourself, He's already done it. He already knew that you were going to do that. And hence, that's why it's called a new you with a K, because He already has established the desire for you to even want to begin over again, like new. You, not a project, but you. So, how did he do that? He created all of the elements of heaven, all of the elements of earth, but it wasn't perfect. It was chaos. We talked about chaos versus cosmos. Cosmos is order, chaos is messy, but it's a perfect mess because he created the darkness and he created the void. This is something that you have no control over. In any paradigm that I begin or that I create dealing with personal development, it always starts off with God. It starts off with a being, a supreme, a transcendent personality that's greater than who we are, because we realize that we um, are not accountable. We are, I should say, accountable to something greater, to a higher purpose, to a higher calling. So he creates the void, he creates the darkness. There's this God shaped hole that needs to be filled. Now, the next one is light. This is where you begin to create awareness and to identify particular things. Now, remember, he separates light from darkness. And so, with creating this light, he doesn't throw away the darkness. So, we talked about this idea that darkness isn't necessarily bad. It's not necessarily terrible. And what does that mean? Well, what that means is, I think if you start off, you would talk about your strengths versus your weaknesses. You talk about your past hurt, which correlates with your present actions, and start separating those things. But then you begin to get a little bit more mature. Your preferences versus your values, right? Light versus dark. Remember, that's not necessarily two bad things. And I think that when you become more mature, you start to see, oh, wait, hold on, wait a minute. It's not your greatest decisions are not going to be between what's good versus what's bad. It's going to be between something that's good versus something that's great. All right. Let me just check my levels here and make sure that we're good. Um, yeah. So then you look at things like your purpose versus your vocation. And so next is we talked about the vault, the boundaries. So the vault is also called the heavens. That's where the sun, moon, and stars are, which we'll talk about later. But it separates the heavens from the heavens. So it's like if you can bear with me, it's like the separation of sky versus sea, but the vault also is like this cap, so to speak, that puts this barrier between the heavens of heavens, right, and all of that, and then also what's underneath the earth. It's very interesting. It's very interesting how he formed the waters and separated the waters from the sky, and I think that that's important there. So that's what that vault is about: separating the waters from the sky. Okay, the next thing is that he oh, and sorry, the vault is about setting boundaries. Okay, and that's what we talked about there. Now I probably have to look back at the vault again, because I'm looking at certain paradigms, and it is saying that separating waters from sky, but I could be wrong. If we look at and if you just bear with me, Just bear with me for 1 second here. I just want to see something right quick, guys. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. So he made the firmament. We said the firmament is the vault, divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above. Okay. So um I think that there could be different interpretations of what the waters above and the waters below look like. And the reason why I say that is because I think when we looked at the Hebrew version of the earth, I want to say, and I just bear with me here. I want to say that underneath the firmament is the sky and the sea and all of that. And then above the firmament is the heavens of the heavens and the God of the heavens. So it's a little tricky, but here's the point. Regardless, and I just want you to take a look at this. Let's see if I can pull this up for you so that you can see what I'm seeing here, so that you understand what I'm talking about. I'm just going to share this with you right quick just before we move on to the next thing. Let me just share my screen with you. So we're looking at this right here, guys. So it's not just the separation between sky and sea. Take a look. Take a look at this. So you see where some interpretations is that the firmament, right, is separating the sky and sea. But as you can see here, the Hebraic a version of this, the firmament separates the sky and waters from the other, from the atmosphere above, from space, so to speak. And that's the version that I subscribe to. So I know that we talked about sky and sea. Yes, that is also included because there is some separation, but I think that there's also a wider context here. And so I like this version of what it looks like. Okay, so let's keep it moving here. So we talked about the vault. Now we're looking at the land. The land is about the foundation, your habits, which form your character over a certain amount of time. And then also on the same day, vegetation was created. So we didn't look at the vegetation itself, but more so the roots that are digging down. What is it actually drawing nutrients from that produces either a good or a bad vegetation? Now, the vegetation that God created was perfect. And so we looked at this idea of the mindset, which makes things real. The mindset is the root. The reality is what comes out, your actions, your habits, the results, the consequences. And we'll talk about that as an example as well. Second to last, we looked at delegates. So he created sky, sea, land, light, dark. He created all of these elements, and then he put particular things in place for each of them. He put the greater light to rule the day, lesser light to rule the night, birds in the air, fish in the sea, humans and animals on the land. So every space that he now has created, which was void, is no longer dark, but it also is filled with delegates, people who can now run, or beings who can run or rule or occupy the space. Now, not every being was a ruler. The only beings that was given, that was us. When he says to rule, subdue the land, and subdue doesn't mean to hurt the land. It really means to cultivate it, right? I have dominion over the earth. It doesn't say have dominion over the sea, dominion over the earth. And so that's that. Then the last one is to chill, rest. By God not creating something, he actually did create something. By not creating anything else for the world, because he didn't, he stopped on day 7, he inevitably created rest. And so we talked about this idea that if you don't rest, you will shut down. Your body will shut down eventually, because that's just how it works. You will get sick. For a lot of people, it can be very fatal. You can, have, I don't know. The whole point is you actually do need some sort of rest. So that is the entire overview. Here's what it looks like in real life. The void. God created the darkness. He created the void. When I wanted to start over, there was this gaping hole of figuring out, what should I do? Or where do I actually fit in? There's that sense of confusion and not understanding. Okay, that something needs to be made over. I knew that something needed to be made over me, but in what capacity? And that's a good thing. That's a good place to start. Okay, so that was this is before day 1, so to speak. This is in the beginning part, right? Me understanding that God placed me there. So he has placed you there too. And you're just like, okay, ready to go, ready to rock it out. Where do I start? I feel so empty. How do I get filled? That is something that God Himself has placed there. Okay. So that's something that you want to consider, and that's something that you want to embrace. It's not necessarily a bad thing if you are looking to start over. Now, if you're thinking that you're good, but you still feel whole, you still feel the void, then you skipped a few days. There's some things that need to be worked out. Okay. So the next thing was light, the awareness, and for me to identify that that was actually happening. You don't really know that unless light is shed on it. And so one of the things that happened for me was I ended up crying for the first time in like 6 years, y'all, but maybe even 7. And it was, I identified what was actually happening. There's a new season that was shifting. I went through the full stages of grief for almost everything, for New York, for relationships, for stuff that I never really went through before. So there was denial, there was anger, there was the bargaining chip, like, hey, listen, well, maybe if I do this, things will change. I did all of that. There was depression. And then there was finally acceptance. And the acceptance piece, I really feel like came when I cried it all out. I was like, okay, I'm accepting that there is a new season. I'm accepting that there is a shift. There's a change that's happening, and it's time to move forward. This is what needs to happen if I want to be the person that I was called to be. I have to leave certain things behind. Here's another thing too. Here is where we talk about with the light and the awareness and identifying. I had to understand what was my calling versus what was my vocation. I love user experience design. That's great, but that's not my calling. I'm working towards building the portfolio. I'll talk about that in a few days later, but that's not what it is. I looked back at the stuff that I wrote down and realized I'm in the realignment business. I help people either realign gift with purpose, action with ideas, brand identity with the business model. Like, those are the things that I love doing. I love solving problems, but at the core root of it, it's helping people to make the connection to be their whole self. So for me, if you can have a whole business, it's because you now have a whole mindset. It's really a lot about it, personal development. And I wrestle with that because a large part of me is very scientific. And so for me to talk about motivation, personal development, a lot of that sometimes on the other side of my mind feels like fluff, and some of you might be struggling with that too. You might be struggling with, man, I don't know if, this is really legitimate. One of the biggest challenges that I had when I was in college was switching my major from architecture. That's very concrete, right? No pun intended, but it's, you deal with blueprints and actually building things. And then I switched over to communication and religion, which was back then considered the easiest majors. So you would think, right, the humility of switching from one to the next. And then not only that, you get older and you realize the two greatest fears is still speaking in public and death. Communication and religion, so the point is, there are those of you that are wrestling with who you aspire to be versus who you already are. And that's something that I had to wrestle with. And even if you fall into the comparison trap, I will still wrestle with that if I'm not too careful. So this whole idea of light and the awareness of what is dark and what is actually light, identifying and separating, it's not saying that you're throwing it away. I'm not throwing away being a UX designer. I'm keeping that stuff. I finished the certification this year. I'm finishing the portfolio. Like, those things are actually being done or have been done. The MBA and healthcare, that's all good, but that's not the light, if that makes sense. It's not bad, but I had to identify and be able to categorize things. That's for me. So for you, you might also be wrestling with that as well. Okay. So that's day one. You got the void, you got the light. Okay. Now we are moving to the vault. This is the boundaries that were set. So now what I had to do, you're moving in newness, right? Now I should mention, from a Christian perspective, those of us that do believe in God, and not just God, but Jesus Christ, this whole newness begins with believing in Him first, right? So that is without saying. So for those of you that are believers, we're on the same page here. For those of you that aren't, I still do believe that this process will introduce you to understanding that there is somebody who's created something that's amazing and will hopefully lead you to the one who has already chosen to save you. All right. So that being said, the vault here is the heavens, right? It's this cap, it's this boundary. I had to redefine some friendships. Now, not every relationship needs to be thrown away, but it needs to be capped. So think about those of you that might be in new connections, new relationships, where you feel like you're on cloud 9. Well, cloud 9 is different from deep space 9. For those of y'all that know Star Trek, Deep Space Nine is way deep in space. God has created this boundary, this vault between what's above and what's beneath. And so you got to do the same thing as well. You need to know your limits. Now, we did talk about the fact that some versions say that he separated sky from sea, but there are other versions that says, no, there's this vault, there's just heaven where sky and sea are underneath. And then you've got heavens of the heavens and all of that above. Hence, why we need rockets, and then the boosters need to be on the rockets in order to go through the actual, pierce through the actual atmosphere. I think that's what it was. So does that mean that we have found a way to pierce through? I don't know. I don't know how high the vault is, but what I do know is that there are boundaries that God put in place, right? So that's for me. One of the biggest things is the vault for me are the connections that I'm making in this new space. I have to be so sensitive to how I am interacting with other people and how much leverage they're going to be able to occupy my own mindset, emotions, time. That stuff is important, guys, because what you don't want to happen, this is what you don't want to do. You don't want to start repeating cycles as you're saying that you want to be a new person. You'll fail. So next thing, land. So now he separates the sea, he gathers the sea together, and then the land appears. And so this is where the foundation is. Now, for me, I consider foundation being your habits and your character. Why? So for me, routine. Morning routine is important. Evening routine is important. I'm still working on the evening routine, but it's interesting that as I'm beginning to have more I'm reinstituting the morning routine like I used to in the beginning of the year and last year, and also my devotion, repetition uncovers patterns. So for those of you that don't know this, David C. Baker, he has an amazing mind. He deals with, I think one of his latest books is called The Business of Expertise. He talks about this idea of intelligence, and intelligence is brought about, it's cultivated, it's manifested by doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's by recognizing patterns. So for those of us who are consultants, we have a great way of solving problems by eventually, when we're solving the same issue over and over and over and over, we start to pinpoint, like in A Beautiful Mind, like how he was pinpointing Russell Crowe, he was pinpointing the patterns, and even though he was suffering from schizophrenia, neither here nor there. Point is, he was able to figure out and see things that other people didn't see because he was so engrossed in the process. So if you keep doing something over and over and over again, you would eventually realize some of the patterns. So what does that happen? For me, by doing the morning routine more intently, there are other things that I was able to pinpoint and to figure out, which will lead us to the roots part. But here's one of the things. Wow, if I keep doing the morning devotion or my morning routine, that also includes devotion, that also includes exercising, that also includes eating, there are other things that are going to happen. Okay, like what? I have to go to sleep earlier now if I want to be able to stream live at 8 o'clock. I have to eat at a certain time beforehand, because if I don't, I'm going to feel so weighed down. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. So weighed down when it's trying to exercise in the morning. Y'all remember in Creed 2, very first scene where Adonis is about to get into the ring, but he's still in the back room. And I don't know if it's his wife just yet. No, not yet. But Dee asks him, she did it in sign language. Did you take a dump? And he was like, yeah, listen, for me, the body's asking, listen, we about to get into some intense work, that HIIT, that high interval intensity training. Y'all can help me out with that. The point is this, you will feel it. Hey, listen, this morning I felt it because I didn't eat as early as I should have yesterday. So when I was done, my body was like, okay, now let's expel everything that was holding you down today. By the way, I did hit number 61. So whoop to that for the burpee challenge. Okay, so laying the foundation, create habits, repetitive habits. It will ingrain in your character. Romans 5:3-5. It says that perseverance produces, or trials produces perseverance, character. That means that you got to have enough perseverance to start shaping who you are as a person. That's crazy. So, okay, next one. Roots and land were built on the same day. I just want to check and see if y'all are still with me. Okay, if you're with me, you can just drop something in the comments. So God didn't say, I'm going to create land one day and then vegetation the next. No, he says, I'm going to create land and vegetation. We focused on the roots. Why? Because I'll give you a good example. A couple days ago, I was exercising. I felt real tired, and I had to figure out, well, why do you feel tired? Well, let's look at some of the patterns or some of the actions that were going on so that you can get to the root of the issue. Okay, well, I'm tired because I didn't have enough sleep. Why didn't I have enough sleep? Because of school. What about school? I was procrastinating. Why were you procrastinating? Because I was feeling a little bit fearful, or just I didn't want to attack, or I didn't want to approach the work because of just the amount of stress that it takes to even just think about the bureaucracy of healthcare. Oh my goodness. Why do you have that feeling? Well, my mindset is that there's this fear of failure. Fear. So your fear impose this feeling of just overwhelming anxiety because you're just like, oh my goodness, I don't know, which imposed the procrastination, which made school, you starting the assignments that you're supposed to do later, which means that you slept later, which means that you felt tired, which means that your exercise, the vegetation at the top, the exercise was impacted. So fear affected the exercise. Now, remember, this fear of school, you would think has nothing to do with your exercise, but that's how you want to start seeing the roots, what's on your foundation. You're creating these patterns and you're becoming a new person. You're putting this stuff into action, right? Here's the other thing with the foundation. You didn't have to create it. It was always there. Remember, God just gathered the seeds and there goes the foundation. So you have a foundation already. Don't waste your time trying to figure something out. Most likely, if you're reinventing yourself, you already have something in place. Christians, Jesus Christ. Those of you that aren't, you probably have a set of patterns and habits that allowed you to experience success at one point or another. So what I'm saying is this. Even though it may not seem related, it's all interconnected, and there's some stuff that you are thinking about, that you have a mindset about, that's going to affect something totally, seemingly unrelated. You got to figure all of that out. You got to get to the root, because what's at the root is going to show up on the vegetation of your foundation. Okay. So that was me. That was just a prime example that I was able to discover just this week. Last one, or the second to last one, is delegates. So we're looking at, you need a community. This is people who you are going to trust to fill your spaces that you've created. You've created sky, you've created sea, you've created land, you've created light, you've created dark. What are you going to do? So God, for light and dark, he created light to rule the day and still light, but lesser light to rule the darkness. I think that's cool. He didn't create some kind of dark to rule the dark. Now, remember when I was talking about the purpose versus vocation, and I said that, for me, purpose was light, vocation is dark, and there weren't necessarily two bad, one bad versus the other one good. But I love this idea of light and lesser light. So it's almost as if, and I don't want to overdo this here because, sometimes I can make connections that don't exist or that shouldn't be made, but it's almost as if you've got the strong purpose, which rules the day, and you still got the residual purposes that rules the other things too, like that governs even your vocation. I think that that's cool. But the point is this: you've got things in place that you are now trusting to handle now that you've done the work. You've already done all of that work. Now you need to do more work, though, to delegate people or resources to figure those stuff out. So for me, what does that look like? I have a UX mentor. Like, there's a guy who's checking in on me to make sure that that the next piece, which is my portfolio, is done on point, so that we can go ahead and start submitting not applications, submitting like proposals and things like that for clients. Like my end goal is to have high ticket clients. That's my end goal. The fallback is to be a management consultant, to be a user experience designer, and in an entry level position, maybe mid, depending on how strong the portfolio is, because of just the work that I've done before. And then that's like the 9 to 5, right? That's like the safety net. But the true one is you stay self-employed and do the stuff that you've already been doing, but now you can do it at scale with higher quality clients. Okay, that's cool, but you need a mentor. So I've got that. I have a UX portfolio coach. And let me tell you something. When you start hanging around people that got these things, eventually, shout out to y'all know who y'all are that got these coaches too. And it was like, man, I need to get a coach too. Like, eventually you start to manifest and you start to materialize the people or the habits of the people who are around you. So yeah, I got coaches now too. And it's not because I'm trying to one up or I'm trying to be, it's just because you're in that culture and you realize, wow, there's some things that I just can't do by myself. The latest one was therapist, betterhelp.com. Like, that's something I realized, wow, you know what? If I'm really going to move in this season, there's some stuff that needs to be uncovered, some stuff that needs to be healed, some stuff that needs to be addressed that I probably won't, not even probably, most likely won't be able to process unless I'm able to do it for somebody else. There's some people that use this streaming and all of that as a way to that's just one way. And I figured, I was like, no, what if I don't do this properly, I'm going to end up using this as a therapy session, and I don't want that. So, I've got that in place as well. Listen, guys, there's some stuff that, you just took my last little bit and was like, you know what? Follow the money. I told you all about, was it yesterday, day before? One of the devotions was, if you want to know where your heart is, where your heart is, that's where your treasure is. You got to look at your bank account. Look at where you are spending the things that is just occupying your life, the needs and all of that. Look at the budget. And so for me, I realized a lot of it was work related. I make something and I put it right back into there's nothing being put back into me. So now in this last quarter of the year, I'm really, and when I say last quarter, I mean like the last 8 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks, I realized, okay, we need to make a shift here. You need to be poured into as well, not just the resources for the work that you're doing, because it's not going to work, which leads to this other idea of balance. I really have to begin to balance my work-life activity, and that's under the vault too, right? That's under the boundaries. And then the last one is to rest, okay? This is all good. Listen, I'm hitting 60. I hit the 61 mark today, but guys, my body is telling me, I don't know if we can keep hitting over 50, over 60 now every day. My goal was to hit like 90 by the end of the year because there's only 30 days left. So I probably won't hit 90 because, we're already, midway in December. But the point is this. There may be a time, and it happens, y'all know it happens in working out, where the body just gives out. Failure, and some of us, we do the reps to failure. Some agree, some disagree with that approach. But I'm not saying it's going to happen, because what you say is usually what's going to manifest. I was actually surprised that I hit 61 today. I'm not gonna lie. I'm doing it. I was like, man, this might be the day that I might have to tell them. I might have to tell y'all 60 is my cap. That's my vault. I think we're good for that, with that for a few days. But I hit it. And even when I hit it, I realized, I was thinking to myself, did I skip some numbers? Like subconsciously, did I really, And so I'm going to have to start getting one of those exercise watches or something to keep me accountable and track me just in case, but anyway, that's what it looks like in real life, guys. I hope that you'll take this and that you'll use some of it, all of it, not none of it. I know there's something in there that you can use, and just really start to apply this. What do you need to identify and be aware of? What boundaries do you need to set? What habits do you need to create that you keep doing over and over, which creates intelligence, which then becomes part of your character, so you can see the gaps and what needs to be filled, what needs to be removed. You won't be able to figure some of that stuff out until you start doing certain things every single day repetitively. It's just not going to work. Like I said, for those of us who are consultants, if you don't keep doing the same framework, the same problem, solving the same thing over and over, we aren't going to grow. That's why some web designers are great at doing web design, and they only use WordPress or they only use Squarespace, because they know intimately what the platform does, what it can't do, its limitations. So they're not like, yeah, I can do this, I can do this, I can. The really good people, they say, no, this is the only platform I'm using. So if you're using Joomla or some other Drupal or whatever, you're going to have to switch over if you're working with me. And these are the suite of resources and plugins and stuff that we got for the stuff that you might have used. Better yet, we know how to custom develop those things. Like, that's the space that you want to be in when it comes to the foundation. And then get to the root. Get to the root of your issues, because if you can get to the root, you can see why the vegetation looks like what it looks like on the actual foundation. Your habits, your character, all of that. On top of that are things, the fruit of those things. And if the fruit is sour, it's because there's a mindset issue. Okay. And then I got to rest. Sometimes you just got to let it all go. Now, this is great. Here's how we're going to end this with two things. The first one is, I'm thinking of creating like a Skillshare on this. and let me know if this is something that you would be interested in, where I'd actually create a more structured, day by day module or whatever, so that you can actually go through this process yourself. We'll put it on like Teachable or Skillshare or something, and we'll use this series and probably the series before, mash it all together and just make a whole course out of it. I think that'd be cool. But the second thing is this, and I think this is even more important than that. More important than your feedback is your action to what I'm going to tell you. Do not think that you need to reinvent or create yourself or recreate yourself if you really haven't done the work to realize what needs to be fixed. Okay, I think that sounds off, but does that make sense? Like, some of y'all are just addicted to reinventing, always going to the next conference or watching the next motivational video. This is not for that. Don't go through this whole entire process because you are fearful of what day 4 looks like, day 5 looks like. The biggest thing that prevents me from doing particular work or applications is asking other people for help. So it's like the references that need to be done, the letter of recommendations. That is the slowest part of the process for me. Still don't know why. Well, I do. But the point is, for a lot of us, we need to figure out what's the thing that's preventing us from going to the next day before we just say, oh, okay, I'm just going to start all over again. No, don't start all over again. You're wasting your time because you're going to end up hitting that same day again. And you got to face the same issues again. Some of you don't have a foundation. You don't have the discipline to be repetitious enough to do the same exact thing. Sometimes it's just keep it real simple. Some of us, you just need to have a uniform for the day. I just said, for me, one of the things that I'm doing from streaming, I'm not going to be trying to struggle and figure out what I'm going to be wearing every day. We're going to wear the black shirt. That's what we doing. It's simple. It's easy. Repetitious. Like, some of y'all, that's what y'all need to do, right? You got to figure out what's the one thing that I can do every single day until I can, okay. Some of y'all, you don't have boundaries, struggling with that. And so you're going to say, I'm going to start over all again. And then I'm going to but you're going to end up having to come to the point where you're going to have to put a cap over your relationships, the cap over work versus, your everything outside of work, the cap over all of that stuff. All right. So you know who you are, right? So if that's you, this process is probably not going to be helpful to its fullest, because you're addicted to starting over and going back into the darkness and back into the chaos. It's time to start forming and filling. All right. So anyway, I'll see you guys in the next morning motivation. We'll see how the next one goes. I don't know if we're going to be doing series, another set of series for this. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's easier. I'll be honest. It's easier to do like a series thing because you can just kind of keep with it for a little bit in transition, but I don't know. We'll see. If there's anything that you might want to see happen, or anything that you probably want to see me talk about, then drop it in the comments. I think right now we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on Periscope. So yeah, holla at your boy. All right, guys, you have a wonderful, thoughtful Thursday. See you on Friday.